news. Tickets for the Conference on Religious Trauma, Court 2023, are now available. Also, if you're interested in an ad-free version of the Divorcing Religion podcast, come join me over on Patreon. Links for both are in the show notes. Thanks. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious recovery consultant. I'm very pleased today to have Willie Cartwright as my guest. Willie is a speaker, entrepreneur, author, and advocate. He's a professional person, having received a B.S. degree in finance and earned an Executive MBA. Though he and his wife now own several successful businesses, Willie and his sister were raised by a single mother in the public housing neighborhoods of Birmingham, Alabama. As a child, he was relentlessly bullied due to his thick glasses and stutter. His stepfather was so verbally abusive that Willie threatened to kill him. Raised in a strict Christian household deep in the Bible Belt, Willie walked away from organized religion and Christianity in 2015. After doing exhaustive research on the topic, he wrote his most recent book, From Saved to Sane: My Journey Away from Christianity and How It Has Adversely Affected the African American Community. Willie Cartwright, welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast.
I am honored to be here. Thank you so much. I am excited. So good. Glad you had me on.
Thank you for agreeing. I mean, we didn't even know each other. A stranger pointed me in your direction, and I'm just grateful. That was when I was considering speakers and continue to consider speakers for the Conference on Religious Trauma. And in the meantime, I thought I would just love to get you on this podcast. And I see that you were a guest not too long ago with Dan Barker and his lovely wife, Annie Laurie, as well. And you were on their show. And they, of course, are responsible for Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is kind of a funny story. I wrote the book, and like 2020, I kind of put it out. And through social media, I became friends with a guy from Birmingham. Ironically, he's an attorney, and he actually attended law school with my undergrad college roommate. So he read the book, he liked the book, he reached out to me, and he asked me to, he actually purchased the first book, loved it, and he purchased several more. And he said to me, he said, I'm going to send this book out to some people, including Dan Barker. And I said, yeah, okay, right, whatever. Because I'm very familiar with Dan Barker and his work. So I said, okay, whatever. A few months later, and remember, I didn't know this guy from Adam. We met through social media. He followed me, some of the content that I put out on social media. We became kind of friends, both being from Birmingham, but completely different sides of the world in Birmingham. So he called back in about several months. And I remember my wife and I was driving down the street, and we had the car phone on, and he called, and I answered the phone. And he said, guess what? I said, what? He said, Dan Barker wants to, Dan Barker, I sent Dan Barker your book. He loved it, and he wants to interview you. I said, get out of here. Stop playing. I almost hung the phone with him. He said, no, serious. And I said, okay. And I'm still really skeptical. I said, okay, whatever. I said, you can tell him to, call me or whatever. And 2 days later, I think Dan called, and I know his voice because I've heard him on podcasts, and
yes,
I recognize his voice, but I was still like, really, is this really Dan Barker? He said, yeah, this is Dan. And so we talked for a while. And so him and his lovely wife, they had me on. We talked about the book and some other things. So it was awesome. Awesome.
Boy, you're in the big leagues.
I know, right? That's exactly what I thought.
Exciting. Yeah, very cool. Oh, great. So you're receiving some good publicity. And did you find it cathartic writing the book?
Yeah, that's really the reason I wrote it. I didn't write it to sell per se. I had fashioned myself as a motivational speaker, years ago, and I kind of got away from that because that's kind of what everyone was doing. But during the process of learning how to create a speaking business, one of the things that I was always told is that you need to have a book. You need to have a book. You need to have a book for credibility and also something to speak off of, right? So when I made the transition away from Christianity, I started doing a lot more research, and I got involved in some of the forums online, and I started to notice, or started to communicate with people who had experienced trauma, people who had different stories about religion, about leaving religion, even people who were still involved in what they were going through and enduring. And I said, I have a story, and one of the things that I did see a lot of was middle-aged Black men from the South that really told their story about being Christian and then leaving Christianity. What a lot of people know, or what a lot of people can figure out, is that African Americans, for the most part, we are generally considered to be the most devout demographic when it comes to Christianity and religion. So a Black non-believer, especially in my age bracket, is really, really rare. And so I said, well, but I want to tell it. But I started seeing other people like me, but just they were not in the position to where they can where they can come out publicly about their disbelief. Mm. So I said, here's an opportunity. I work for myself. I'm not worried about losing friends or a job. My wife, we both kind of left the faith together. So that part was taken care of. The only issue I had was dealing with immediate family, right? So I said, well, let me put this information in a book so that it can get out. So I can, what I really wanted to do was to speak about the subject matter based on the book. And so, I wrote the book. It was very therapeutic. I got some things out. I talked about my experiences, sent it out to a few people, kind of talked about it on social media. Then people started buying it. And I found that more people were interested. I actually had people from the clergy to buy it and purchase it. I had one guy who had attended seminar back up in upstate New York, older gentleman, but he read the book. He said that he really felt that a book like this would really work well in a seminary school, because it was a balanced book and it presented both sides and it challenged people to think. And that was the reason why I did the book, because I wanted to challenge people to think. So yeah, absolutely. So it's been a lot more than what I thought it would be.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it sounds life-changing in some ways. I've been so fortunate to be in contact with Jeremiah Kamara and Candace Gorham, and of course Mandisa Thomas of Black Non-Believers. And it's just been so eye-opening for me, a middle-aged white lady from Canada, just like having a view into a different world and, causing a lot of introspection in my own life. So I thank you for writing the book and telling your story and prompting people to think. And I wonder if you would share with us a little bit about your own growing up, your childhood, the religious influences there, and what prompted you to leave.
Okay, great. So first you mentioned Jeremiah and Mandisa, who I know personally, both of them. Mandisa is here in Atlanta, so I've been to some meetings with her and spoken with her. But Jeremiah is different. It was a different meeting, and I just kind of want to touch on that really quick before I get into that. I had spoken to a friend of mine about the book and what I was doing, and she said to me, and I have been reading and watching all of Jeremiah Camaro's stuff. He has some stuff on YouTube, his videos, his documentaries, all of that. And she said to me, she said, I got somebody who I want you to meet. I'm going to set up a meeting between y'all. And I remember saying to my wife, I said, if this is Jeremiah Camaro, I'm going to lose my mind. And she was like, I don't know if you know the guy, but his name is Jeremiah Camaro. I said, you got to be kidding me. She said, yeah, Jeremiah Camaro.
Amazing.
And if you know Jeremiah, because of his experience and where he's gone and where he's been, he is really careful and cautious about who he sits down with, who he meets with. But he agreed to meet over lunch. Meet with me over lunch. We had lunch here in Atlanta area. Great conversation. I even quote him in the book. Wonderful guy. I got a lot of information, so it was wonderful meeting Jeremiah. So yeah. So my upbringing, I think it's typical of anybody, not just Black, but white people growing up in the South in the 70s and 80s. Everybody went to church. Everybody, confessed to being believers, believing in God, believing in Jesus. Most of the people that I knew were Christian. I didn't know anybody that was not that didn't believe in God, and I didn't know anybody of any other faith or denomination. I didn't know of anybody of any other faith. Everybody I knew was Christian. Within Christianity, you had Baptists and AME and some of the other denominations. I knew one guy who was Catholic, but everybody went to church. I mean, everybody went to church, everybody confessed to being believers. And you dare not say that you were not, even if you wasn't. So that was pretty typical. My mother was very, very devout. You couldn't miss school and you couldn't miss church. Growing up in our household, I never missed school except when I got expelled a couple of times. But outside of that, I never missed. She never allowed me to miss school, and we could not miss church. And so church for us on a Sunday started at about 8:30. We would get to church before Sunday school started. We would get to church a lot of times before anybody else would be there. We would be standing outside, and a deacon or a janitor would come and unlock the door. So that's how early we would get to church on Sundays. And so we would stay all day. If you ever attended a Black church in the South, we tend to worship all day. So we would have Sunday school. We'll start at 9 o'clock. It would start anywhere between 9:15 and 9:30. So 11 o'clock service would start about 11:30, and that would go on until 2:30. We lived on the other side of town, so we would go to a friend's house, or one of the members of the church, and she would feed us because she lived around the corner. And then we would go back to church for 3 o'clock service, which started about 3:30, and it would end about 6 or so, and we would get home around 7. That was every Sunday without missing a Sunday. Wednesday night, we did the Wednesday night Bible study. We were part of the choir at different points in our upbringing. Other groups within the church, we would go BTU, which is Bible study, revivals, which took place during the summer. So not only would my mother take us to our church revival, which usually lasted a week, every evening during the summer, she would take us to other revivals throughout the city as well, other church revivals throughout the city as well. So I basically would spend my summer evenings at revivals throughout the summer in different churches, right? It was brutal. We would even do the outdoor tent revivals. Well, I mean, this is the South. This is 95 degrees with 100% humidity. It would be just brutal. And we were kids who want to enjoy our summer, but this is how we would spend our summer. And so my mother, she was very particular about doing that. So the whole upbringing, everything was we saw everything through the prism of church and God and everything. That was it. As I when I went off to college, it was for the first time I met people who were religious but practiced a different faith or whatever. So I met people who were 5%ers. I met guys who were Muslim and Nation of Islam, and different groups. And I sort of became interested in not just what they were doing, but religion in general. I remember coming home once and I was telling my mom that I was going to convert to Islam. And she, so we joked about, we used to joke about this before she passed, but we would say that she told me, she said, well, Muslims don't eat pork. And at the time I loved ham. And so I said, okay, I'm done with that. Right. But what it did though, it served as sort of the foundation for me to really wanting to know about other religions and basically admitting to myself that I had problems with the practice that I had been part of all of my life, Christianity. So go on, 20 years or so, and I'm in and out of church. I'm feeling guilty if I don't go to church, but I'm having second thoughts. I'm not sure. I'm in and out. And eventually I said, you know what? I'm just going to stay. I'm going to continue to go to church. I believe, right? I met my wife in 2005. Ironically, she had grown up as part of the Muslim faith until she was 20, and then she converted to Christianity. So for the last 10 years, she had been a devout Christian. Her mother, she had got a mother to convert, a devout Christian. And so we met and we attended one of the large churches here. The pastors on television all the time. And then we went to another large mega church. We did that and never thought anything. I mean, we never even questioned each other about our belief. We just assumed that we both were really, really devout. Never had we never had any conversations about not being believers at that point. And so my wife and I we love being outside in nature. We hike, we work out. So one of our hikes around a very popular park here in Atlanta, we were walking and we just basically stopped and looked at each other, and just both of us really at the same time just kind of said to each other, this religion thing is not working. And we both were shocked. I was relieved, and we talked about this later. She was relieved because she didn't know how I was going to take it, and I definitely didn't know how she was going to receive it, right? And so we made a vow at that point that we would explore, we would begin a journey of religious exploration to see what was out there, what was different, or how we felt. For me, I didn't want to become part of any other religious group, at least at that point. That was my thinking. Like, I'm done with religion totally. My wife was like, well, let me just explore. She eventually gravitated to Buddhism, which it depends on who you ask. It's really not a religion. It's more of a practice, more of philosophy. She's been she's been a practicing Buddhist for the last 4 years. It works for her. It's perfect. It's her. If you met her, it's her personality. It's great for her. I, on the other hand, I got really interested in just religion and the role that it plays in our lives and why we feel that we have to have it, the origins of it, all of the different denominations and Christianity included and all of that. So my journey was more about exploration and discovery and understanding religion and how it affects us, and especially the African-American community, because we, more so than any other group, live our lives through the prism of religion, more so than any other group. And so, and that always, I'm not gonna say it's a concern for me now, but it was always something that I was inquisitive about. Like, why is that? What's the whole? And so that was 2015. I went for about a year without really telling anybody. I started doing some stuff on social media. I didn't tell my mother. I would call my mother every Friday and every Monday. And usually on Mondays, she would ask us, how was Sunday service? And so for about a year, we would lie. We say, well, we didn't make it. We overslept. We stayed out late Friday, whatever. And this one particular day, she asked me, and without thinking, I just kind of blurted out, well, Mom, I don't believe the way you believe anymore. And my mother is me times 10. Like, she's the most extroverted person that you will ever meet. Like, she was just, and she has opinions about everything, and she did not mind letting you know her opinions, right? But for about 30 minutes, she let me talk, and she didn't say anything. And then we hung up, and I said, well, when I come home for the holidays, we'll have a deeper discussion about this. And my wife was shocked. She's like, that's not like your mother not to have anything to say. And I said, yeah, you're right. I don't know what's going on. I get a call a week later from my sister, who's a couple of years younger than me. And she says, what did you say to Mom? I said, what are you talking about? She said, Mom said you're the Antichrist. You're going to hell. You're going to burn in hell. You're the devil.
Oh, no.
Just all of this. And I told my sister what I told my mom. And I said, well, my wife was really hurt by it. I wasn't, because I knew my mother. It wasn't shocking per se. I knew that she would have some reaction, because her whole life was, this was God and the church, and Jesus was everything to her. Mm-hmm. And so I told my wife, I'm not shocked, but I am a little surprised and a tad bit hurt, because she had always kind of revered me, being the firstborn, being the first in our family to graduate from college. I was sort of her prize. Even my sister was like, you're the favorite. So and she never really challenged me on anything. That was 2016. We never had a chance to sit down and really talk about it, because unfortunately she passed away about 6 months later in mid 2017. So we never had that conversation. So yeah, I did that. I started to really get really vocal on social media about my beliefs or my disbeliefs. I lost a lot of friends, people I had been knowing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm wondering, so after you were able to speak with your mother, was she kind of the greatest concern for you? Did you feel free then once your mother knew and there was no more pretending going on? Did that allow you to feel free to become more vocal about your non-belief?
Oh, you know what? I that never hurt. How she would take it never concerned me that much. Only because I had always been kind of a rebel growing up. Like I always wanted to do my own thing. She had said stuff to me before that was hurtful about different situations. So I guess I kind of was used to it. But I think I was so ingrained in the transition at that point till, I tell people you kind of go through the phases. Like I started off, I was angry because I felt like I had been lied to all my life about this stuff. Then I wanted to tell everybody what I knew and how they were wrong and how I was right. You go through all of that. And then I kind of balanced out and said, really, what I want to do is just give people the information. And I want people to think critically and analytically about why they believe what they believe. And that's kind of where I end up being, right? So that wasn't, it was, I think what shocked me more so than anything else was the number of my peers who really just after, 30 and 40 years of knowing me said, I'm done with you and washing my hands of you. We're no longer friends. That was more surprising than anything. But on the flip side of that was the fact that I started getting private messages, and even when I met people out, of people who I've been doing for a long time that said, I've been feeling like this for years, or I've always felt like this, or I've never really been a believer. I'm glad you're saying what you're saying. Continue to do it. I can't on social media support you because of, I might lose a friend, or I might lose my relationship, or I might lose my job, or whatever it was. And I was fine with that. So it was, I got both sides of it. The reason why I left was because, and I tell people all the time, it's not church hurt. It's not, it's when people really leave the faith, not church, but leave the belief system, is because we didn't find enough information to make for us to continue to be believers. When I started really pulling back the layers of the onion and really started doing the research, it was just not enough evidence there for me to continue to believe what I believed. As a matter of fact, and there were so many things that was detrimental to us as human beings. If you read the Bible, all of the atrocities in the Bible, I just found it really, really difficult to believe and continue to follow a faith that condoned slavery and genocide and the killing of babies and the mistreatment of women and misogyny and the mistreatment of people who are different, whether they be gay or lesbian or whatever it is. I found it really, really difficult to continue believing that there is this God who condones this, who has no problem with this. And so that, and then when I started looking for the empirical, non-biblical evidence of characters or events, and understanding that there is little to none that is verifiable, that is corroborated information and evidence, I was sold, I was done, I was good. But there, I tell people all the time that religion is an indoctrination process, especially when you start off really young as a child. So even when we left in 2015, 2016, early in 2017, 2018, my wife was experiencing some mental health issues. And unbeknown to us, my mentor, who was a pastor, who's the guy who married us, who I think the world of, and still do, great guy, great, wonderful guy. Him and my mother-in-law and even my sister had kind of colluded together to pray for us that we would come back to the church. And so all this was going on with my wife. We kept hearing the reason why this is happening is because you left the covering of Jesus and you come back to. And so we tried to go back to church, right? We went to a church and they laid hands on my wife and did all these prayers and they did this every Sunday. And then we went to his church and he brought in some special people and they did all kind of stuff. And then he said this to me. He said, Willie, the reason why this is happening is because God is trying to get your attention. God wants you to speak for him. When I tell you I had never been that angry in this whole process and this whole transition and this whole journey, I was so angry because I said to myself, first of all, if this God would hurt my wife, the one who I love more than anything else, as an attempt to get me back, number one, that is just cruelty. Number two, this God really doesn't know me, because what this God should have known is that would push me even further away, right? So I was really angry about that. Needless to say, it did not work. My wife and I decided that she would go and get professional secular help from a professional, someone who's been trained, and it worked. And she's been good ever since. And so I tell people, I said, once you take the toothpaste out of the tube, there's no putting it back in.
It's so true.
It's hard to even sit in a sermon and hear this stuff, and we couldn't do it. We tried, but we couldn't do it. So yeah, for me, it was the lack of information, the lack of empirical information to back up the stories and the characters from the Bible. What I think it has done to my community, the African American community, and I talk about that in the book. I talk about the finances, the amount of money that is wasted. I talk about the mindset that is developed with it. I talk about how it takes away our collective responsibility to fix the ills of the community, because we're letting Jesus fix it. We're letting God handle it. And so many things. So many things.
And that's definitely the conclusion that I've come to as well, because, people are quick to jump in and say, religion's not that bad. A little bit of religion is good for you. Nothing's wrong with my religion. And for me, something that it really boils down to is magical thinking. Do your religious beliefs require you to suspend your reason and logic and embrace magical thinking? If so, I don't think it's great. I don't think it's healthy. We need to be investing our energy into finding real solutions for real problems, not just praying and Jesus will handle it. That is not helpful. And in fact, I think it's harmful when it prevents people from doing the work that needs to be done. I would love to see humanism, particularly secular humanism, continue to rise to the forefront as Christianity recedes into the background. But it seems, particularly in the United States, Christianity is so absolutely tied in with racism on which your country has been built and built around. And so there's so much ripping and tearing going on. It's just seems to be a very painful time for the United States right now.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny that you said that. I am currently, and I don't think I mentioned this, I am currently in school again. I'm working on a master's in religious studies at a secular state university, not a seminary. So it's funny because whenever I tell, especially Black people, when I tell them that, and I try not to tell them because I don't want to go into this whole discussion about it, but I tell them I'm in school for religious studies. The first thing, because what we've always perceived about religious studies, anything dealing with religion, is that you are going to be in seminary school, or you're going to be, or it's theology. I've never known anyone that studied religion for the sake of studying religion, right? That was just not part of our upbringing. It was, if you did anything with religion, it was theology or ministry. And so when I tell people, especially Black people, they're like, "What? You?" I said, "No." So I have to explain. But anyway, so I'm in school, state school here, working on a master's in religious studies. So I have my first semester, we just finished, 3 wonderful professors of varying degrees of belief. I think one is devout Christian. The other is probably somewhere in the middle, even though he doesn't really come out and say it. And then I know for a fact that the third one is just used to be the believer, is no longer a believer. And so the reading material touches on what you said. A lot of the reading material is about the correlation between Christianity and racism and historically what has happened in this country. And I've often said, I think I might even said it in the book, I said Westernized Christianity is the religious arm of white supremacy. Mm-hmm. And so I've said that on my podcast, and I've said that in the book as well. And so we're learning those things in the reading material. And so I'm bringing that information to people on my podcast, and we're talking about, the racial issue, the racial aspect of religion, in particular Christianity, evangelical Christianity. So yeah, it's funny that you said that. So yeah, that's what I'm doing currently. I hope to pursue a PhD after this so that I can teach. And my goal is to teach people to think critically about what they believe in. And the rationale behind that for me was that when I look at my community, there's a lot of ills. There's a lot of ills in every community. But specifically when I think about my community, I think about what is it that controls, that is the controlling mechanism, controlling piece. And it's the way we think. And then on top of that is, okay, so what influences us the way we think more so than anything else? And it's religion, it's faith. Religion and faith is also the only thing that we don't think critical about. Everything else, we want to see evidence and information, as we call it, receipts for, except our belief system, right? And so I figured that if I could teach people, especially my community, to think critically and analytically about their faith, then maybe we can do that about everything else. When we look at, over a 20-year period or so, 40-year period, it might have been, somewhere in the billions and billions of dollars, we as a community have contributed to the church. And that money goes to banks. And oftentimes within our communities, the banks won't lend money for us to do things like start business or whatever. So I said to myself, and again, I talked about that in the book as well, what if we took those funds, those same funds, and created schools or healthy grocery stores or financed people who wanted to start their own businesses or whatever, those type of things. Those are some of the practical things I think my community can benefit from if we start to dissect how we view religion and how we look at religion.
Wow. Yes, that is so true. It really does seem that religion is that sacred cow. You can poke and prod at politics and all sorts of other things, but it's considered very bad form to attack religious beliefs. And I get flack for that all the time and being told, well, why can't you just be quiet? If you don't believe, just be quiet. I don't see my job as running in and yanking people from the pews and shaking them and tell them they're being lied to. I see myself standing at the outside, at the bottom of the church stairs, trying to catch people who've been thrown out or tumbled out or, not welcome there anymore, to catch them and let them know it's going to be okay. There are other people who have endured what you're going through and have asked these difficult questions and have been released or even shunned from their communities. And it is possible to build new, safe, secular, supportive communities, even though the pain is real. The grief that we experience when we lose our faith, when our entire identity was built around that foundation of faith and our worldview. Everything was ordered according to what Scripture said. And then to come to the realization that, well, I don't actually think the Scripture is real, and I don't even believe that God is real, because a lot of people do end up landing on that. I did. And then you have all these other existential concerns that come into play at that point. So it really is a process. And I could relate when you said, oh, first you're angry. How could I believe those lies? How could they lie to me all these years? And then you're like a new zealous convert.
Oh, yeah.
Having deconverted, telling everyone. And these are all just parts of the grieving process that we go through when we are recovering from religion or when we have divorced religion.
Yeah, I get the questions you get from close friends. Why are you doing this? Why are you concerned about what people believe? And I tell them, I said, because what people believe, especially in this country, affects everything else. It affects policy. It affects laws. I said, we have laws that were created based on the religious beliefs of Christians, right, that don't apply to everyone. I said, you look at how people who may be gay or lesbian, how they are treated based on another person's belief system. You look at, from a scientific standpoint, we can't do certain things because stem cell research, people don't believe, they believe that that's bad because it's coming from aborted babies. It's a long list, people who are ostracized from their families because they believe differently, right? Or because they don't believe at all. And so what I tell people on my podcast is that what I'm doing along with other people in this space is trying to create a safe space a space where we can come together, we can talk about these issues. You don't have to be a full-fledged atheist. You can be someone who's basically just questioning, because that's how I started. I started by questioning the things that didn't make sense to me. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, they didn't give answers because they didn't have to, right? They would say, it is what it is, and that's it. And you left it alone. You didn't ask any more questions. So we get to the point now where young people, they're able to, because of the internet, they're able to challenge you on things that you say, or even if you don't have answers, they can find answers. And ironically for us here, 30% of people under the age of 30 are now considered nons, N-O-N-E-S. And so that is awesome. That is a great thing. And even within the African-American community, that number is growing. So there are people who are moving away, younger people who are moving away from Christianity, moving away from religion, or they're creating something that really works for them, whether it's a belief in nature, whether it's meditation, whatever it is, they're creating it, they're moving away from it, and they're not being held hostage by the religious beliefs of their parents or grandparents or the community or society. And I think it was a great thing. I just think I was born probably a generation too late. But people like us, I think they look toward us and say, okay, for me, if they can, because you rarely see someone in my generation from, this part of the country that's overt and open about their disbelief, about their non-belief. And so a couple of classes I have at the university here, I take what's called a hybrid class. So it's graduate students and a lot of undergraduates. And watching and listening to those young people between the ages of 18 and 22 and 23, it is wonderful because they're not tied or bound by the same religious beliefs that we have. As a matter of fact, when I had one professor, and he teaches religion and mental health, right? A fantastic class. Great. Exactly. Right. A fantastic class. He used to be a believer. He's now a non-believer. He and I are like 3 years apart. I'm actually 3 years older than he is, but he's also from Alabama. And so we talk about things that we experienced growing up. And here are 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds who are looking at us like, are you serious? You guys actually did that or believed that? Wow. Or that was part of your, like, are you serious? What is that? And it shows you just how indoctrinated we were and kind of blind to reality. I mean, it's so far beyond reality. Some of the stuff that we believed and practiced is really, but it's really eye-opening to be in a class with a bunch of young people who have total opposite of the way that you were brought up in belief system. So it's great. It's great.
Yes, I find it refreshing. My daughters are in their 20s, and when I'm so tickled whenever they want to bring their friends over, and I can be a fly on the wall, and to hear these young people just speak so openly about sex and sexuality and issues around gender and things that there was so much oppression when I was growing up in the church. Yes. And these young people who either their parents weren't religious or they weren't very religious, and they just seem to be unencumbered. And that gives me tremendous hope for this generation and generations to come. And I think it is a lot of young people who right now are really stepping up in the United States when it comes to politics and getting out and voting for the first time because they don't like what's going on. They don't like the oppression that they see, the oppression by the religious right and the Supreme Court and the white Christian nationalists. And these young people, they are learning how to use their power. And boy, I'm so grateful for it as a Canadian because it's pretty scary. Whatever we see going on over there, we feel over here to a certain degree. Yes. And I was delighted to hear you say that your wife determined that she would reach out for some real therapy, therapeutic mental health help. I'm a big supporter of the Secular Therapy Project.
Oh,
People
yeah.
can go to seculartherapy.org. Also, of course, the Clergy Project, which is helping current and former clergy who are trying to navigate now that they no longer believe. And some of them, of course, are losing their livelihoods, or they would lose their livelihood if their employers found out that they no longer believe. So the ex-religious community continues to grow as awareness of religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome continues to grow as well. And you're a member of that community. You add your voice and your knowledge there.
Absolutely. It's when my wife first started experiencing what she was experiencing. My Christian upbringing, it was responsible for my initial reaction, because what I had always been taught or experienced when people had mental issues with that, first of all, is it really real? That was always the first question. Secondly, it was, well, this is just someone being possessed by the devil. This is, whatever. It was never taken as a serious illness, right? And so I was really sort of dismissive early on. And my wife and I, when we talked about this, I was really dismissive early on. And then I started understanding it and going through it. And then also as a man, one of the things that, I grew up, and as a man, we always think is about, let's fix it. Can we fix it? What's the problem? Give me the tools. Let me fix it.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. And I didn't understand that, right? And so we went through that. She sought secular professional help, got it. We kind of had to go back a little bit later to kind of make sure that everything was going right. The second time I handled it completely different. But now my wife is a tremendous advocate for people seeking professional secular help if they have any kind of mental issues. She is the biggest advocate, and I am a huge advocate now because I understand it, because it happened to someone that I love, someone really close to me. And it wasn't the way that I was taught it to be. It wasn't the devil. It wasn't a demon. She wasn't possessed. It is a real illness that she needed to see professional help for, and she got it. And we talk about it with other people now, so to help other people with their issues.
Wonderful. Yes, at the inaugural conference on religious trauma, Court 2021, Dr. Darrell Ray, who's the founder of Recovering from Religion, Dr. Ray gave a presentation on how the psychological and psychiatric community, it seems to dismiss the idea of religious trauma. And I certainly run into this with colleagues myself because many people who become therapists or counselors or social workers are Christian. They have a very strong Christian background. They love other people. That's why they're motivated to go out and try and help them. But they also bring their faith into it. And it just can't be that way. If someone is struggling with issues particularly related to religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome, they do much better speaking with a secular therapist who is educated about trauma and religious trauma in particular.
Yeah, I think it really angers me, especially where I am now, that religious trauma is not taken seriously. I can't tell you the number of people I have conversations with who have experienced, myself included, but I know people who've experienced being sexually violated and raped by church members, by pastors, by deacons, and the church covered it up because of this person's position. Sure. I've talked to friends who were Mennonites, and they talked about their experience and having to leave and kind of run away. I've spoken to women who were formerly Muslim and Islam and what they go through. Just everyday conversations with people who've had these experiences with the church and even leaving it, trying to break away, how devastating it is, because you lose friends, you lose your sense of identity. What happened between my mother and I, if I was probably any other person, that would have been even more devastating. But, even just smaller things like the sly remarks and the sly cracks that you get from people when you tell them that you're not a believer, and the things they said. How many times I've really had death threats from social media posts that I've made. I've had people to say you're gonna die, or you should die, or God is gonna get you, or I'll just the whole list of stuff. And so no one should have to endure that simply because they choose to believe differently than you believe or don't believe at all, right? And so it is so much more. It is, when I read these forums and I hear the tragic stories of people who said, I came out to my family as gay and they basically kicked me out the house and I have nowhere to live. Or I've been estranged from my family because I married someone of the same sex, or even going to a different religion. I started to get into nature or whatever, and now my family thinks I'm crazy and they don't have anything to do with me or whatever. It is really amazing that the medical and the science, those so-called counselors don't understand that aspect of it. That's why I was glad that we did, and we specifically looked for a counselor that was not a Christian counselor, because we knew that was not the direction for us to go in. So,
yes. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to say that I've been invited to speak to do a presentation on religious trauma at the 9th International Trauma Congress in 2023 in Amsterdam. So
awesome.
That was exciting for me because it is a medical event, medical conference, and for them to be interested in the concept of religious trauma, I just think is huge. So hopefully I'll do the topic justice and get some good words out there. And I also wanted to mention that just a few months ago, I hosted online the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference. And I was thinking of that as you were speaking of some of the religious trauma folks have told you about in relation to being LGBTQ. And so people can still buy recordings from the Shameless Sexuality Conference. And also, we can always direct people to the Conference on Religious Trauma YouTube channel, because that is where I'm posting free of charge, of course, all of my podcast interviews. And I'll go through year by year and be putting up all of the sessions from the conferences on religious trauma. I just think it's that important for people to know that they're not alone and to be able to access resources. And speaking of resources, where could people find your podcast and how's that going? How often are you doing it?
I do it every other week. It was every week, but I started school, so it's every other week. I actually will be doing the last one for this year. I will be doing tomorrow, and it's entitled God/Jesus is Santa Claus for Adults. And so it's timely, it's seasonal. But the name of the podcast is named after the book is Saved, and the number 2, Sane. Saved, SAVED, 2, Sane, SANE. And that's on the podcast, Willie Cartwright. You can find that. There are, I don't know how many videos there now, but I've been doing it for probably almost 2 years now. So we do that. And someone found me. I started doing them kind of, every so often. And a lady who was in the middle of her transition, she found me and she said that the videos really helped her. And she had a huge following on YouTube doing some other stuff. She reached out to me. I started off as a guest on her channel. She helped me to develop my channel. And she's been a guest on my channel, but I've had several people reached out to me. So I've done guest appearances on other podcasts as well. I did one just last Sunday. And so that's been great. And so, so that's, you can find me there. You can subscribe to that, Save to Sane. And then the book you can get from, can we see the book? You can
come a little closer.
Okay. Oh, I think it's blurred out because I have the background. Yeah, I have the background. Okay. I forgot about that. So I put it in front of me like this.
Oh
that
yes.
works.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And I've got the name, and
Yeah.
you can read the name to us again,
Yeah, I
please.
will.
The full name.
So it's From Saved to Sane, My Journey Away from Christianity and Why Christianity Has Been Detrimental to the African American Community. You can get it on Amazon, Willie O. Cartwright. If you, I tell people this, if they want a signed copy, they can cash out me. The book is $19.99. You can cash out me at $Willie Cartwright 1906, cash app and your address, and we'll get a signed copy out to you. So that's been awesome. The book is going well. I want to continue to do this kind of stuff. That's why I'm in school. This is how I will spend the rest of my life because this is really a calling. My wife believes it. I believe it. It is really a calling. It's something that came out of nowhere. I never expected it. But for the last 7-8 years now, so it's good. And I'm glad to see that the community is expanding, and people are really understanding the significance of it and why it's important that we have this community.
And thanks to folks like yourself who are just so passionate, speaking out about some of the traumas inflicted by religion. And I want to thank you for joining me today on the Divorcing Religion podcast. And I want to thank you, our listeners and our watchers, for supporting the Divorcing Religion podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to us on our Conference on Religious Trauma YouTube channel. And we'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody.